Hey, what's up, everyone? If you've ever tried to grow teeny tiny bonsai like these guys and had problems getting them to actually grow, today we're going to talk about some techniques that I use in order to be more successful. This is a tray that I grow some mame in, and mame is the Japanese word for bean or mini bonsai. We call them mini bonsai on our site. And before I started using this tray, I was having significant issues with the trees not being healthy and not really putting on any growth. But you can see from each one of these guys that I'm getting a significant amount of growth. So obviously, this technique is pretty useful in terms of getting your mame to be successful and more resilient. But there's some stuff going on here that you might not see. So, like this one stands out kind of as the most distinctive, with all of that, 12 inches worth of growth coming out of this tiny little container. This is a Zelkova. I've got some Cotoneasters here, and I've got a exposed root maple in a small container, and some junipers here in the back, and this one here in the front. So let's deconstruct this. The first thing I'm going to do, because this has been put together like this for over a year now, it's got a pretty thick layer of moss on it, and partly that's due, even though I live in a dry climate, is due to the secondary and tertiary waterings that I'm doing in the afternoons to make sure that these guys aren't drying out on warmer days. So that moss has really sort of colonized things here, and it's getting a little bit too thick. I'm not going to get rid of it, but I am going to take it off and kind of reset this whole thing and show you guys how to put it together. So let me just pull up a couple here and show you what's going on. Now, underneath, so this is regular bonsai soil in these containers, which is akadama, pumice, and lava. And then down underneath here is a sifted fine lava. Now, if you can't get fine lava like this, you can also use just like a coarse play sand. Most home centers, you can get a coarse sand, and as long as it's been rinsed for salt content, which usually is not a problem around here in San Francisco, at least, it's a good medium for nestling the containers into. So you can see this one has a fair amount of roots that have come straight out of the bottom of that container and are headed down into that lava. The lava, that fine lava that I have down in here, is staying pretty much moist all the time, and occasionally I'll just come along and pick these guys up and then just snap off these roots that have extended out of the bottom of the container to prevent it from relying too much on those roots. All right, so I'm gonna pull apart the rest of these, and then we're gonna put it back together. All right, 3 left to go. I've pulled all the moss off the top that I want to keep, left some of this moss that has liverwort in it that I don't want to keep, and now I've got to deal with these 3. And as you can see, they are well rooted into this container, and that's what I would expect based on the growth on this Portulacaria. The great thing about Portulacaria is that it doesn't matter how many roots you cut off, as long as you keep them in the sun and don't let them freeze, they'll be fine. So I'm just going to cut all those roots off there for that little Portulacaria. And I'm not even sure whether or not it has roots inside this container. I'll just set that aside. The same thing is true for this Zelkova. I'll just do it right now. Go ahead and trim back all these shoots to just 1 or 2 leaves to reduce the amount of transpirational stress that the tree has, and just doing that not for aesthetics but basically just for horticulture. And then it's grown down through this tall container straight out the bottom into all of this lava. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off all of these roots that are sticking out of the bottom. Now, I should have pulled this out. Well, you can do it multiple ways, but ideally I think I would have trimmed these roots more frequently so that they weren't making quite this large of a root coming out of the bottom, because it's going to slow the tree down significantly. It's not going to hurt it, and I've actually done mid-season root work and stuff like this to Zelkovas before, so as long as I keep it properly watered afterwards, it won't be an issue for me. So little Zelkova in a Cascade Jim Barrett pot. Of course, it was at one point a Cascade, but then it kind of pushed itself back up. And finally, well, actually not finally, we have this little juniper that's been in here for a while. Now, junipers are a little bit more sensitive to root work, but I've done this a few times, and so I know I can come in and cut off some of those roots and still have no issue. And this one I was kind of leaving to just sort of grow for a little while. It's gotten a little bit overgrown in terms of being a good mame. I think that's more like 4 or 5 inches across at this point, but that's easily remedied in another time. All right, so rather than one large tray, I'm actually going to use this smaller shallow tray for a few of the trees. And in order to prep this, I've got a drainage screen there, but the drainage screen is actually the holes in the drainage screen are too large for the size of lava that I'm using. So I'm going to take a little bit of just coarser lava and put it right over the drainage screen here to prevent the fine lava from leaking out of that screen over time. Now you might be asking yourself, why not just use a tray full of water? And you certainly can, if you use a tray full of water, be successful, and we'll cover that in another video. But I find that what you're essentially doing when you're creating a tray like this is potting a bunch of trees into the same container and just giving them sort of an auxiliary area to grow roots. And the tiny container that they're in gives you the sort of aesthetic goal that you're trying to create, which is that nice small container. And the larger container underneath the tray and the lava that's in it keeps the plants from drying out too much and getting into danger in terms of the horticulture. It also obviously provides an additional place where they can absorb fertilizer and that sort of thing. So it is a potentially game-changing way to grow your mame if you haven't already done this. All right, thanks everyone. Look forward to some more videos coming on how to keep your mame happy and healthy and growing.